coming to the 250th year of our country. We're there. We're at our 250th. And those kinds of big anniversaries are oftentimes where we take stock of what's going on. I remember very clearly as a young person the biennium. And I was like so excited. Like they minted coins, 1776 to 1976, and I was so excited. What was it? It's not the biennial.
Bicentennial.
Thank you, bicentennial. And it was so exciting that we'd been here 200 years, and it was a really exciting, wonderful thing. Now, of course, I'm a grown up, so it's not just about the special T-shirts and whatever we're going to get. It's about really doing some stock taking. And we as a Jewish community have been forced into that. And the American Jewish community in particular has been forced into kind of thinking about our relationship to this country in a way we really haven't had to in decades and decades and decades. You should know, scholars, rabbis, we are all having this conversation among ourselves. This is one of the main topics of conversation. What is happening in Jewish America? What is going on with Jews in America, the Jewish community in America, Jewish relationship to America, America's relationship to the Jewish people and to American Jews? What does it mean vis-a-vis Jews in other places? So this is not a class on anti-Semitism. I am not an expert in anti-Semitism, nor do I want to give anti-Semitism a lot of time and energy. What I do want to do, and this is the last time I'll talk a lot about it in this first session, is I do want to kind of set the stage for an overarching view of where we are in this moment, and go back a little bit to see where we've changed from our modern experience as Jews in America, and even a little further back as our article we'll talk about tonight, Dr. Jonathan Sarna, talk about how this has happened before in America. And we know how it's happened, but we can talk about it too, before in Jewish history. This idea of having one status and one experience, and then circumstances drastically changing. We are feeling that in America post October 7th. That did not start on October 7th. We know that. And so we're going to look a little bit about where we are right now as we begin the conversation of Jewish America, Jewish at America 250. Okay? All right. So we're going to begin with an article by, and I have blankets if anyone else is freezing. So now that I'm getting going, I'm almost freezing. All right, so I'm going to begin with an article by Dr. Jonathan Sarna called The Promise of Something Better. We're going to send the link out to all of you at home. If each of you, this is done by staff, if you can figure out where it begins and ends. And actually, Danny, if you wouldn't mind giving one to everyone here, that would be great. And I'm going to share, don't worry, I'm going to share my screen for those of you at home when we start reading. There is a theory right now that a lot of us are talking about, particularly, like I said, rabbis, Jewish educators, Jewish philosophers, Jewish historians, Jewish sociologists, all of the professional Jews right now are talking about, is the golden age of American exceptionalism over? Mm-hmm. All right. So these are key words being thrown around. And one key term is American exceptionalism. What does that mean? Anybody want to help unpack that? Is the age of American exceptionalism over? What does this term mean? What does it suggest? You don't have no right or wrong answers. What does this suggest to you as a concept? And you can unmute and answer if you want at home.
Special.
Ah, who's special?
I'm special. American.
We know you're special, Shelley. But like, who is this? What is this American exceptionalism? Who's special?
Well,
What's special?
our Constitution, our
America. America is special.
Amy,
Yes.
it's not just that we're special, really. It's that so much of the rest of the world thinks they're looking up to us. So whether we're special or not, we've convinced large chunks of the globe that we're the country that's doing it right. And
So America.
Yeah,
So you're talking
America.
America. Okay, so that America is as what? The pinnacle? The apex?
Yeah, we're doing it the best.
We're the best. That's even
The
better.
best.
That we are the best.
I think so.
Okay. Others.
Okay.
What else might this trigger? What does this mean? What is this talking about? Yeah.
Groundbreaking.
Yes, it's over.
Groundbreakers.
Who? America?
America.
Are groundbreakers. Okay.
Let's get to ego here. How about richest and strongest and smartest?
Richest, smartest,
The best and brightest.
strongest.
And the brightest.
Okay. What's interesting about all these answers is that this term, American exceptionalism, applies to Jewish life, Jewish history. Can someone read?
I can't get on this thing. Yeah, but I have no sound. I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay. So nothing. It's okay. The link will come out tomorrow, so don't worry about it. You're going to get this article tomorrow. We're going to put it up. Okay. So Jewish American exceptionalism
but I'm not hearing
is
anything.
a term used by Jewish scholars to talk about
All right,
the
well,
American
talk to
Jewish experience. Now, what does this term mean, do you think?
We've been lucky up to now.
We've been lucky up to now, says Sheldon. Not only lucky, it's been an exception. The American experience for Jews has been an exception. That's what exceptionalism means. How has it been an exception? In what ways and I think this is the foundation of our conversation for the rest of the course. So that's why I want to do this now. In what ways has the Jewish experience in America been exceptional?
We tend to overperform. If you look at, just give one example, potential.
So there's a lot of Jews
Think about
in what? Political leadership? Political
government, in business world,
Okay, so
especially given
political leadership and other high places.
Especially given that we're 2% of the population.
Education. Say more about education.
We've had intellectually people who are of the Jewish faith that have been intellectually leaders.
Leaders in education, prominent. Would you say prominent and prominent institutions?
We've been able to be citizens.
Ha! Beautiful.
That's what I wanted to say. We've had our freedoms here.
Okay. Good.
I was going to say there's a lot of people, Jewish people, involved in the TV industry. So they have a lot of influence, perhaps. I heard that a lot from somebody I knew. He said they're all Jewish. I said, no, that's not quite true.
Okay, so a lot of media influence. Right. So this is the way that America's been a little different for Jews than in other places. That is absolutely true. The most pointed meaning when they're talking in the literature about American exceptionalism is it could never happen here. Because of all of these things are proof. Look how successful we are in the media, in higher education. We are prestigious. We're at Harvard. We're at the highest research teams in bio, blah, blah, blah. Like, we're everywhere. It could never happen here. That is the story of American exceptionalism. We are free. We are citizens. We have always been citizens. The only country to ever have us as citizens from the inception is America. The only country where we've been citizens since the beginning and have never lost it. The only place, America. Therefore, there is something unique about the American Jewish experience that has us feel safe. We're flourishing. We're thriving. We're Americans just like other Americans. That was, okay, I'm gonna get to more specifics later.
What are you referencing when you say it? It could never happen here. What is the it?
The Holocaust.
Okay.
Whatever massacre, a pogrom, like whatever has happened to Jews other places, it would never happen here. That is what they're talking when they say exception. This is the exception. America is the exception to every other place where Jews have at some point become vulnerable enough to be targeted. Okay, somebody has their hand up, but I can't read it from here. So who's got their hand up?
To join.
Oh, someone wants to join in the waiting room. Okay. So if somebody wants to put the waiting room person in, that would be great. Okay. So that's one thing, American exceptionalism. Just keep that term. They gave me a whiteboard but they did not provide an eraser here. Can you give me a napkin? I know it's not about y'all at home being able to see this. It's about my ADD-ness that it helps me to write. Okay. So American exceptionalism. That's one term I want you to keep in mind as we go through this series. The other thing, and we're going to talk about this specifically tonight, is what a lot of folks are writing about and talking about is the golden age of American Judaism, post-war American Judaism, calling it the golden age of American Judaism, is over. This is a premise that is getting a lot of debate and discussion in the Jewish intellectual world. And I don't mean intellectual like snotty. I mean the folks who are really thinking about these issues, about what is our place, what's happening, what are the dynamics, what's shifting, what's changing, what do we need to be aware of, how do we want to respond, what's worked in the past, they are saying that the golden age of American Judaism is over. Other people are saying, no, it's not. But I want you to know that this is a real conversation that's happening, and it is driving a lot of the energy about what people are focused on. It's driving planning in the Jewish world. Where's money going to go? Where's time and attention going to go? So this, whether you're interested in this or not, or think it's pertinent or not, this is the question. Is American exceptionalism and the golden age of American Judaism over? How you answer that question determines a lot of how you look at where you're going to spend your time and energy and effort and money and funding. All the funders are looking at these questions. And depending on how you answer is where you're going to start putting your money. That's not true. If you answer this way, there's a bunch of answers for what you could do. If you answer this way, there's a bunch of things you could do. We're going to be looking at, all right, so what are some of the things that people are talking about and positions on that? We're going to look a little bit at that tonight from Sarna's perspective. And then I'm going to send home an article with y'all from Dr. Mijal Bitton, who has an argument. I want you to see an example of an argument for, okay, if these answers are yes, what do we do? what do we do? And then hers is one example of a response that is, I think, very thoughtful and whatever. And it's called The Future is Sephardic. The future of Judaism is, or whatever, is Sephardic. Okay. So I will give you the link for those of you at home. Those of you here have it to take home and read. Okay. And then we're going to start looking at America and democracy and Torah and all that stuff. But I want to get a sense of where we are and what people are focused on. Okay, let's look at Sarna. Or actually, before I go any further, I just gave you a lot that folks are talking about and writing about, and a lot of us are reading. I want to ask y'all, do you feel that something has fundamentally shifted for American Jews in the last few years? Or does it feel like just another period, and there have been lots of periods, and like this is just episodic and this is just another one? And why? Yes. Mike.
First, I want to say, if you let me, that, well, we all know the Holocaust, but Lori and I were in Berlin some years ago and went to a brand new Jewish museum there. And I learned really for the first time that Holocaust happened in Europe every 300 years. It just, as you walk through and you see the Jews never got to live inside the castle walls, they lived outside. The marauders came by every so often, and the king might or might not protect the Jews who lived outside. So that surprised, well, obviously I knew we were not a favored people around the globe, but that surprised me. I had thought for my first 30 or 40 years that this country was safe for all of us, including Jews, at least through my grandchildren. And I no longer feel that way. Over the last, and it's not just the Trump era, but it's the last 10 or 20 years, I agree that our golden age is absolutely over. When people these days talk about protecting minorities, we're not one of the minorities that people are thinking about expressly. Today a woman won the Senate primary in Florida over Vindman, who, and she's the quote progressive, which now means, Bernie Sanders and Jews are, we have too much. We're too popular. We're too wealthy. We're too much on the media. And so I no longer feel that this country will be comfortable for my grandchildren, who, by the way, are in their mid to late 20s. It's a very different world than it was a generation ago.
So you're definitely feeling that that's a yes. That this is new. There's always been, and there have been episodes, and there have been periods, and blah, blah, blah. In America, this is a new phase. This is the golden age is over.
I absolutely feel that way.
Okay. Other people? Yeah. Shelley?
I remember as a teenager, lots of anti-Semitism. Maybe it was where I was living because there weren't many Jews. But I think the difference for me is that it is so acceptable now.
Mm-hmm. So the tolerance for intolerance has changed. Yeah. It used to be there, but you're sensing that you knew at least not to say it out loud in certain company.
Yeah, well, it used to be there, but it wasn't as accepted. It wasn't
right. You didn't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Lori.
The other thing we're noticing is that we're the only group that gets attacked from both the far right and the far left, both.
Very nice. Mijal Bitton does a lot of work. She's at Hartman, and she's here in the university system. She's Sephardic, and she does a lot of work on this, saying that the Jews are trapped because they are attacked from both the right and the left. On the right, it's that Jews won't replace us. Who's us? White people. White people. So Jews are not white. to the right, Jews are not white. We're a race, right? We're our own thing.
Yeah.
And on the left, Jews are
Only
white, lily white, powerful, connected to the channels and the levers of power. And because we are so powerful, we cannot possibly be vulnerable. Therefore, we cannot possibly ask for any kind of protection, or there can't possibly be a threatening anti-Semitism. We're too powerful. People may hate Jews, fine, but we're not vulnerable because we are part of the white power structure. So this is what Bitton says is a, double whammy where we're caught.
called a horseshoe, right? It's called the horseshoe.
Well, that's one way. Yeah. That's one way.
Amy?
Oh.
Amy?
Yes.
It doesn't surprise me, but occasionally we'll talk with non-Jewish friends and say to them, so how many of us do you think there are? How many millions of, well, I don't know, 100 million, 2 million. And I think, well, there used to be 15 million, 7 million in Israel, 7 million in the U.S., and 1 million who fled to South America and Australia. Maybe now we're 70 million. That is 0.000, that can't be. Because Jewish people have been visible in Hollywood, in politics, whatever, the world thinks we're some really big group, and the fact is we're tiny.
Right. Right. We are less than 2%.
Yeah.
We are less than 0.2%
of 1%. Yeah.
Of the world's population. Less than 0.2%. We are super loud for a group that is less than 2% of a percent. All right, let's look at this piece. All right, I want to look at I have to share my screen. Pardon me, it's only been 6 years that I've been using this. Here we go. My Torah study people are used to this. Okay, here we go. So this is the promise of something better. What the end of the post-war era portends. So obviously, Jonathan Sarna agrees that there is something different now that the post-war era is over. We're starting something else, something different. So he introduces it by talking about how we rose in status, so much so that at one point in this country it was Protestant, Catholic, Jew. That was kind of how you would talk about religion in America, Protestant, Catholic, Jew, as if we were a third of the religious expression or population of this country, right? Ridiculous. But that's how it was presented, and everything was now Judeo-Christian values, Judeo-Christian ethics, right? So we were pretty up there in terms of status. And that was kind of how people were talking about Jews and Judaism in post-war America, which became home to the largest Jewish community by far in the diaspora, right? Which is now 17 times the size of its nearest rival, which is France, and only a little smaller than Israel. All right, so everyone was coming to America, essentially. One thing I want to point out about this business about Christian America and Protestant Catholic Jew, one thing I want to talk about is this is where Reconstructionism pushed against that categorization that of us as a religion, just like Protestant and Catholic. This, I'm just realizing now as I'm reading some of this stuff, this is where Reconstructionism was different from the start. We never understood ourselves to be just a religion like Presbyterian, Lutheran, Catholicism. Never. The fact that we settled for that was because it worked for us to have a better life in America and be treated like the other two, Catholics and Protestants. We're just another flavor. Oh, strawberry is a little more exotic, but it's really still ice cream, right? You still do the same thing with it. That was a definition that changed how American Jews practiced and behaved. If we're only a religion, what does that mean? Where do you express that? In the synagogue. What is your main expression then of identity? If it's just a religion, like all other religions, it's what you pray, right? It's what your religious leaders say is what you believe. That is not what it is to be Jewish. We know that. But we accepted that to a large extent in this country because it was good for the Jews to allow it to be characterized as just a religion. Other than that, we're like every other American. We just go to synagogue instead of church. That is why people are so confused. Are y'all a religion? Are you a culture? Are you what? Like they're confused because we bought into this ascription that we are Americans who have a religion, just like the Protestants and the Catholics, which is really not true. We have a culture and a history and a language and a homeland, right? And stories we tell about ourselves and a certain way of looking at the world and a shared common understanding about a vision for, what the world ought to look like to some extent. And that has been lost partly because of the Golden Age, meaning the Golden Age meant we accepted being called a religion, right? Yes. Someone had a hand. Yes.
I would, one of the things I would argue for non is an ignorance of understanding is that they don't understand we have different sects of Judaism. Reconstructionists, which I would venture to guess most non-Jews have no clue what Reconstruction.
Most Jews have no idea what Reconstruction is.
Right, and under Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, and Hasidic.
So
we get, so they all come
But I want to say we tend to do it to Christians also. We tend to lump Christians together. We don't talk about denominations. Are they Baptist? Are they Presbyterian? Are they Lutheran? Are they Methodist? We don't even know what the differences are between them. So I think we've returned the favor, to Christians. And even if you accept that they don't know that we have lots of different kinds of Jewish religion, what I'm saying is we've allowed ourselves to be defined by religion. And what I'm saying is that's part of the challenge. That's why we're not white, is because not everybody accepts it as just a religion. They get it that we're a race, right? But it's only the anti-Semites till well, people at home, are you seeing the article on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Go to the back of page 1, all of you who are looking at a printed copy, which means page 2.
Amy, those of us who are at home, you're going to send us that link tonight or tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
You can also just Google it. You have it in here. Huh? Yes, we are looking at
The promise of something better.
The promise of something better, page 2.
Rebecca's going to send it.
Yes, and you can Google it, and it comes up. Sapir Journal. It's Sapir Magazine. You can just Google the title.
SAPIR.
SAPIR is the journal. But the parts we're going to read, we're going to have right here in front of us. All right. While American Jewry status and numbers were rising, meaning in the, post-war era, anti-Jewish discrimination, as well as other forms of anti-Jewish hatred in the United States were subsiding. By the 1990s, this is Sarna writing, Most of my students at Brandeis told me that they never had personally experienced anti-Semitism. They had only heard about it from their grandparents. One former student wrote a book titled The Death of American Anti-Semitism, published in 2000, the year Democratic Senator Joseph Lieberman became the first Jew, a practicing Orthodox Jew no less, ever chosen as a vice presidential candidate by a major American party, right? So he's mapping the ways that it was clearly American exceptionalism and the golden age, right, for Jews in America. Then he's talking about disturbing signs that there was a change, yes? The horrors of September 11th resulted in an unexpected surge of anti-Semitism, right? And then we had, of course, October 7th. So the response of anti-Semitism to September 11th turns out, he says, turned out to be a rehearsal for the tactics of inversion that would reappear with a vengeance after October 7th. In the 22-year span between these two events, the shared script was to insist that Jewish power, rather than hatred of Jews, was to blame for mass violence. A theme we still, right, that we hear resonating extremely loudly, right now. Then we're going to go down to the bottom paragraph on page 2, the very end of that paragraph. Maybe. Jews will not replace us. There it is. So subsequent years saw waves of peaks and declines in anti-Semitic acts. But ever since the shouts of Jews will not replace us at the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville and the massacre at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, things have only gotten worse. And then he goes on to talk about how we have security procedures, right, and everything else at our door. The hostage, so we'll top of page 3 in print, for those of you looking at print. Middle of that top paragraph. The hostage crisis at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. The truck ramming of Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan in 2026, right? And admirers and copycats of those kinds of anti-Semitic things. Last paragraph on page 3, 3 sentences down. Until the 21st century, American Jews generally made Aliyah for religious, ideological, or economic reasons, but rarely, if ever, out of fear. Israelis who did employ scare tactics to encourage Aliyah, as a teacher of mine did years ago, were met with laughter and derision. Now, journalists regularly point to, quote, concern about rising anti-Semitism to explain why inquiries from American Jews about moving abroad have risen. The actual number of American immigrants remains small, about 3,500 in 2025, but the 80% rise in inquiries to Nefesh B'Nefesh, which supports Aliyah efforts, buttresses the claim that the post-war era is over. 80% rise in inquiries to Nefesh B'Nefesh, right? Aliyah to Israel. Okay, that's quite an astounding statistic, yes? So now we're on page 4 for those of you here in print. The sentence, surging anti-Semitism, 3 lines down. Surging anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, Foer argues. This is from the Atlantic, the golden age of American Jews is ending. I couldn't print it because you have to be a member of the Atlantic, blah, 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 but I've read it. But if you want to try to find it, great. Surging anti-Semitism, so the golden age of American Jews is ending. Foer, this was the cover article for the Atlantic in 2020. So he argues, surging anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism reflect the collapse of the whole liberal order that made America attractive to post-war Jews in the first place. The distinct strain of liberalism that Jews espoused and helped to shape, one that combined defense of civil liberties, protection of minority rights, including the rights of Jews, and an ethos of pluralism made that golden age possible. The belief that Judaism and Americanism reinforce each other, the two traditions converging in a common path, what I once called the cult of synthesis in American Jewish life, led Jews to believe that Jewish religious values and liberal American values were synonymous, while anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism were dangerous and un-American. Today, the end of American Jewry's golden age is likewise synonymous with the end of America's post-war liberal consensus. I fully agree with this analysis, by the way. Growing numbers on the political left and right scorn concepts, including equal opportunity, merit, and cosmopolitanism that Americans have long held dear. These emerging centers of gravity also look askance at the once venerated American and Jewish values of neutrality, objectivity, colorblindness, and tolerance. On both sides of the spectrum, many fall prey to conspiracy theories that blame scapegoats, Israel, immigrants, colonial oppressors, Epstein, Soros, and inevitably, Jews, for all the nation's ills. Surging anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, Foer reminds us, are symptoms of a society in danger. They reflect, he warns, the decay of democratic habits, a leading indicator of rising authoritarianism. What think you?
Hello. I'm going to be kind of reductionist. The anti-Semitism is just part of the larger, it's okay to hate everybody. And instead of in the golden age, we were Americans, now we're other. We're not Americans anymore. And if you're Jewish, or if you're Black, or if you're an immigrant, or if you're gay, or if you're anything other than a straight, white, Christian person, you are not American, you are other. And I think that's basically where this is coming from.
So I would argue, Barbara, that's on the right. I agree completely. On the left, there's been a breakdown of the liberal order that made Jewish, Black, gay, whoever, equal and have protections and thrive in this country. There has been a breakdown of that liberal order. Part of it is symptomatic that you see on the right, like you just said, but if you check out what's happening on the left, it ain't about being white and Christian, but it certainly is about Jews, right, are not part of, the liberal order has collapsed. And there is a new authoritarianism, both on the right and some of us argue on the left. Lori?
Yeah. Well, and, sorry. Well, Jews are the only group on the left who are not allowed to define what discrimination is against that group. So we are not allowed to say what anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is. We are not allowed to define that. We support the rights of Black people to say what's racist, of LGBT people to say what's homophobic or transphobic, but somehow the Jews are not allowed to say what's anti-Semitic on the left.
Beautiful. Beautiful point. Really important point.
Yes.
That is.
I agree that every other group gets to decide.
No, well, they.
Rebecca?
If you're on the left.
Yes.
Rebecca, I would like to take me off center screen here.
Okay, I'll come in.
Thank you. Yeah. When I said zoom in, I just meant that they could see me bigger, but not us. We don't need to see me. You see me bigger. Okay. So good point that Lori makes. Other groups that experience discrimination get to define what that is to them. I'm going to say what we do share, however, is a new orthodoxy on the left that someone said to me in a gay, lesbian, transgender, LMNOP, STUV group, said to me, you are a cisgendered female who happens to be a lesbian. You're not even really queer. So now we have right, there's an orthodoxy that says I don't get to define myself as queer because I'm cisgendered and I go by she and I'm just a plain old L. And if you're just a plain old lesbian who presents as female, you're not queer and you're not oppressed. And so you don't have any right to talk about vulnerability and, whatever. So that's what we're seeing everywhere on the left is the collapse of the liberal social order that said, if I'm discriminated against, then I ally with you who are also discriminated against, where now there's orthodoxy on both sides. That's the horseshoe for sure, right? That there's an orthodoxy that if you step out of line, you're canceled. So the alliances of the liberal order have broken down. And this is a lot of what we're seeing and experiencing. But I agree, there is a special way that Jews are excluded from allyship on the left. I do agree with that completely. So anything else before we go back to Sarna? Yeah, Mike?
I want to tell a brief story. This happened some years ago. I'm golfing with a group of fellows, and we were having a drink after the golf. Guy says to me, Mike, I don't understand. The Jewish people say that Israel is your homeland, and you haven't been there for 4,000 years. I was somewhat taken aback, and I said, well, you know me. I said, well, there was this guy about the year 0. He was Jewish, and he lived there, and I forget his name. I think it was Jesus. And another one of my friends and I said, Mike's right. I said, so we were at least there 2,000 years ago, maybe not 4,000, but it was like, what a question to ask us. What a question to ask us.
So my new answer, I haven't tried it out yet. I'm a little scared, but my new answer to that, but you might be there 4,000 years is, yeah, that's because the Arab world colonized Israel. It's true, right? The Arab world colonized the Middle East. It was Rome before that. So just saying, right? It was part of the Roman Empire. And the Arab world colonized it and turned it into an Arab colony. So, yeah, we didn't have access during that time. I'm just tired of the colonial thing being leveled at Jews. Okay. And other people are starting to teach me how to do it, how to say it. Right? It's like, not only are we not colonizers coming to Israel from outside the land to reclaim it as our homeland. Not only are we not colonizers, we are anti-colonizers because it's about indigeneity, right? That people colonized Israel throughout history once they destroyed the Second Temple. Rome colonized it first, then every empire colonized it. Mesopotamia, Babylonia, Assyria, right? And we are uncolonizing it. All right, we'll see if it works. Oh. Where were we? Rising authoritarianism, right? Young Jews on college campuses, bottom of page 4 in your print version, right? Yes. Young Jews on college campuses feel the demise of the post-war era with particular intensity, right? For sure. I had a kid on that. They themselves now confront overt discrimination from fellow students, biased faculty, or ideologically hostile diversity officers. Sympathetic as many of them are to increasing the opportunities for marginalized groups, they feel dismayed when they themselves are marginalized in the process, and when people prejudiced against them are gaslighting them into thinking that anti-Semitism couldn't possibly happen in 21st century America. It's as surreal as it is real. Academia has become the most pronounced site of what Jacob Savage has chronicled as the erasure of Jews from American life, with the percentage of elite American academics under 30 who are Jewish dropping from about 21% back when I was hired to only 4% today. The number of Jewish editors at the Harvard Law Review declined by about 50% in a single decade. The percentage of self-identifying Jewish students at Harvard is actually lower, Savage reports, than in the dark days of the school's Jewish quota. Parallel declines have characterized many other Ivy League schools, with the exceptions of Brown and Dartmouth. Practically no Jews win MacArthur fellowships anymore, something that as recently as 2019 was utterly commonplace. Jewish authored books have trouble finding publishers and winning book prizes. Young Jews have even been excluded from leadership within liberal organizations, such as the ACLU, that their parents and grandparents helped to create. What comes after 5? 6. Yes? Yes. I will. If you have a 6. Thank you. Figure it out. All right. Page 6. America, however, and so I'm going through all this not to depress us. I brought you this article because he's stating what I believe is reality, what a lot of us are experiencing, but I am always going to turn for me and to bring to you sources that don't just leave it there. Okay? So here we go. This is Sarna. America, however, is not Europe. And Jews, because he's talking about, we all grew up with, about the Jews who didn't leave when they could, and the ones who didn't, we know what happened to them, right? So get out while you can kind of thing. Jews are far from the only minority in the United States today to feel targeted and frightened. There are also numerous examples of persecuted Americans, Catholics, Mormons, and Chinese immigrants in the 19th century, German and Japanese in the 20th, who rebounded, experiencing new life and fresh vigor without having to pull up stakes and start life anew someplace else. One suspects that many of the Jews who support Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro for the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination see in him the promise of just such a rebound. America has long oscillated between periods of revolutionary change and eras of restoration that saw some of the change rolled back. He wants us to hold this perspective. Okay? Look down next. Significantly, see that paragraph? Yes. Bottom of page 6? Significantly, every restorationist era in America's past subsequently gave way to the renewal of American freedom. So he talks about, Franklin Roosevelt with the New Deal, the Great Society of LBJ. Whether the future repeats history's cycle of 2 steps forward, 1 step back remains to be seen. But anyone looking to learn from history must keep that possibility in mind. As Martin Luther King Jr. liked to observe, echoing abolitionist preacher Theodore Parker, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And then he talks about Mijal, Bitton. And that's the article that I handed out here, and that we will send you the link for her article, that the future is Sephardic. This is one example, he says, of energy radiating from, quote, the surge, the so-called October 8th Jews who have turned or returned to Jewish life in response to the horrors of October 7th. The young Jewish leaders waging today's fight against anti-Semitism at major universities, the Jews who have flocked to Jewish institutions over the past 2 years to align publicly with their own people, the unprecedented number of post-October 7th converts to Judaism, many of them Christian spouses of Jews who, in defiance of persecution, seek to embrace their partner's faith, the grassroots leaders battling anti-Semitism in workplaces, civic arenas, schools, higher education, and the cultural sphere, and building new Jewish communities. The adult Jewish learners who throng courses about Jews and Israel, the parents who switched their children into Jewish day schools and summer camps, the college students who crowd into Hillel and Chabad houses, and the multitudes who have visited or plan to visit Israel since the hour of its tragedy, all show by their actions that Jews need not be merely passive victims of anti-Semitism and discrimination. They can respond through a combination of Jewish pride, resilience, and defiance, fostering, quote, surging Jews, history suggests, will prove more effective in the long term than fighting incorrigible enemies. Turning inward and shoring up inner resources reflect Jewish muscle memory, recalling what Jews have successfully done with previous bouts of anti-Semitism. What's your response? Maybe I read kind of. What he's saying is, he's seeing, like so many of us, a surge that's happening in response to the responses to October 7th. That there was, yes, a horrible turn of public anti-Semitism and demonization of Zionism and Jews in general, and a surge of interest in, we look at the Israel class that Rabbi Sher is teaching here, and like a bunch of y'all signed up. Like there's this, so there is a surge in, we've had at least 5 people convert to Judaism who have already raised Jewish children. Non-Jews who have already raised Jewish children, who converted because of October 7th. So think about that. So I mean, that's profound. So I'm not comparing numbers. I'm saying there are two things happening at once. Yes.
I felt like October 7th created a surge of sympathy for Israel and for Jews. But I think it was what some people, and I'm one of them, would say was over response that the Israeli government did in Gaza that changed the whole, because it didn't happen in the beginning, right after October 7th. It seemed, the way I remember it, there was great sympathy. You heard it all over the world, and certainly in the Western democracies, in Europe and in the United States, and a great sympathy for what had happened in Israel. But it was 1-2 years later when there was the perception, right or wrong, depending on how you look at it, but that Israel had over-responded by the Israeli government by the massive destruction in Gaza.
Okay. That
turned the tide the other way.
Okay. I don't want to spend long on it, but what I'm going to say is that is another way we accept. That's another way we accept the anti-Semitism. It's Israel's fault. Israel overreacted. It wasn't proportional. I'd love to know what proportionate looks like. We should rape and behead their babies. Is that proportional? Even that terminology starts to be anti-Semitic. It's our fault because, and first of all, what does that have to do with Jews? Hang on. When I'm talking anti-Semitism, the vicious anti-Semitism that we've seen on Facebook, that we've seen everywhere. What does that have to do with Netanyahu and his government deciding how to respond any more than how Bush responded to 9/11 with an insane attack on Iraq? Right? That was insane. You could say, let's just say, Bibi Netanyahu was insane for his response. Oh, okay. How does that match up with anti-Semitism? That's what we're trying to. So I appreciate your point. But this is the way we get gaslighted. Somehow we are implicated in Netanyahu and his government's decision. Why? Why? We're American Jews. We have nothing to do with it. And half of the country didn't vote for him. Okay. So I just want to point that out. But not right or wrong about proportionality, but this is where we fall into the trap that is laid for us.
So Rabbi, here on Zoom, I just, part of me says it's not a surge. It's just an exposure or a revealing of the anti-Semitism, that's always been here, even though, the 250 years of America, we've flourished and had freedoms and stuff. There's just this part of me, instinctive part, that feels like it's been exposed and revered.
Okay. So,
revealed.
Yeah. So a friendly amendment. Yeah. So I'm not disagreeing when I say surge means public, outrightly stated anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So when you say exposed, I'm saying surge, right? It wasn't tolerated before like this. And it wasn't jumped on, like everybody just jumps on, okay, sure, it's the Jews, right? Some of it for sure, and a lot of it was there, but it was not acceptable like it is now, and it wasn't as public, and it wasn't the vitriol, the level of vitriol that we hear and that's accepted now. I'm not saying it wasn't there. Lori, and then Lori. Casey Camp, then Cross.
No, but I do see that the fact that anti-Semitism is now can acceptably be out in the open is true across all kinds of prejudices. So basically, I think in the last, since 2016, say, it's just become increasingly acceptable to demean and say horrible things about other groups, whereas in the past you would have never said it in public. It would never have been a public thing. You may have felt that way. So I think that while anti-Semitism is obviously its own thing, it is very much part of the loss of this sense of liberal democracy where we tolerate each other's differences and we see ourselves as one people. So,
although I have to say, I have not experienced people overtly talking about Black people in social circles where it has become acceptable on the liberal side of things. I don't hear that. And I don't hear them talking about women that way.
Right.
Like, I don't hear certain things. And even though the gay people told me I wasn't queer, it's not, you can't call someone a faggot on the left. And that's not acceptable. You may think it, but you can't say it. But you can be an anti-Semite openly on the left.
That's true. I think it's on the right, I think, is where I was thinking, where it's acceptable.
On the right, they are expert haters and they have no trouble. Yeah, absolutely. Equal opportunity haters. I'm a dyke and a kike and a whatever. But on the left, it used to be not acceptable. And now it is. Okay, Lori hates the camp and then her spouse.
So one of the things that gives me hope, though, is that there are a number of Democratic elected politicians who like Richie Torres in New York, like Rick Zabur here in California, who are strong allies, as well as people like Brian Goldsmith, who's running for our Senate seat, who get it, who really get it, and are anti-Semitic. But like Rick Zabur, for example, introduced AB 715 because the California legislature could not get the school system, what do they call it? The ethnic program in the school system to treat Jews as if they were ever oppressed. They didn't include them at all at the beginning. And then when they did include them, it's like what you said before, they're rich white people, privileged people. So Rick Zabur introduced a bill to have a whole curriculum around Judaism, anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust. So that gives me hope because that passed. On the other hand, there have been 3 attacks trying to gut that legislation. It's like, don't you have something better to do? But that kind of stuff gives me hope. People like Brian and Richie and Rick, and people like that. And Lori Crouch, you're right. On the right, that's all going on. But I live mostly on the left, and it's shocking to me. And it's been this way since at least 2014, with the conference in Chicago, where Jewish LGBT groups were disinvited, then reinvited and allowed to be attacked physically and emotionally so that the hotel had to call the police. That was like in 2014, I think. And that wasn't the beginning of it. That's been going on for a while. But again, to repeat for the 6th time, no, but what gives me hope is that there are elected politicians who are either Jewish or allies who get it, who really get it and are trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
What I wanted to observe is I get 50 political, texts a day. And until recent years, I was under the misimpression that AIPAC was doing a good thing for the world and the Jewish people, that our having a homeland was not a bad thing. And that things would be fine. And I find more and more of these things condemning. I don't take money from AIPAC because, and then voting against providing or supporting Israel's self-defense. I mean, I'm always taken by the notion that if the Arabs put down their guns, we'll have peace in the Middle East. And if the Jews put down their guns, there'll be no more Jews. I mean, nobody can disagree with that. You look at Hamas and, it's just, and yet it's become fashionable, and it is the left and it's the Democratic Party, and it makes me sad to condemn AIPAC because they're trading in dirty money to protect that democracy. I point out to my friends, hey, listen, there's 2 million Muslims in Israel who vote. There was 10% of the Knesset who were Arab until recently. I don't like Bibi any more than I like Trump, and I would like to see a regime change in both of the countries. But the idea that this democracy is now bad or worse, it's shocking to me, and it makes me sad.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. All right. Back to sharing. We're going to close out. So he closes. Now, as the post-war era in American Jewish history concludes, and another movement of restoration begins in the country, accompanied yet again by anti-Semitism, a parallel opportunity awaits. If we nurture the current surge and tap into its energy, we can pave the way for a new, stronger era of American Jewish life, demonstrating afresh the paradox that those who seek to undermine Jewish life frequently stimulate its revitalization. That is what I am absolutely counting on. It is what all of us who are here are counting on. It's what you're helping to make happen. The fact that you show up, to have these conversations. The fact that you're part of a Jewish community that is active and vibrant and supports our own exploration of what Jewish life means for us in America right now. We are gonna be at the forefront of what the surge can turn into because we're organized Jewish life. Bona be organized. I'll put that in quotation marks. Despite people's best effort, like Lori Krause, Lori Hazenkamp, and Mike Lurie, and Shelley, all of our leaders and past presidents, despite their attempts, we remain kind of organized. But we are the ones participating in this project, and it's in our hands. And so I'm very excited to have these conversations going into these next weeks about the American Jewish world and life at 2:15. We'll send you the link to Bitton's article. I love her. She's one of my favorite teachers at Hartman. And you can look for the Atlantic article as well. Foer is his last name. And thank you for being here and for studying together. And it's our first study of this year back in the building that's not Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. We bless the source of life for giving us life and sustaining us in that life, which I say with added kavanah these days of chemotherapy, and sustaining us in that life that we could reach this joyful moment of learning. All right, y'all.
Amen.
Amen.